I was reborn together with Celine, though she doesn't know it. In her eyes, I'm still the same Simp from my previous life. Back then, I gave her the best material support, sent her to top universities, and even backed her entrepreneurial dreams, so much so that my family nearly went bankrupt. In the end, she sucked every last bit of value out of me and tossed me aside. To make things worse, she showed up arm in arm with my biggest rival, sneering as if she had finally escaped the humiliation of being supported by me. This time, I swore I wouldn't give her a single coin of that so-called humiliation again. When it came time to choose a one-on-one sponsorship recipient, she stood confidently in front of me, chin lifted high, certain of herself. But I deliberately ignored her and chose the pitiful girl standing beside her instead. At the annual charity donation event, I attended as a representative of Coup Group. Every year, to demonstrate our commitment, we select one student from many and assign someone from the company to provide direct, one-on-one support. In my previous life, I chose Celine from among the candidates, but she turned out to be nothing more than an ungrateful parasite. This time, I tipped off Simon in advance. He's my sworn enemy, and Celine's so-called unforgettable first love. More than once in my last life, she told me that before I began sponsoring her, Simon had liked her. My money, she said, was what stood in the way of their romance. This time, I wanted to see whether Simon would even spare her a glance before she became my girlfriend. By the time Simon and I arrived at the sponsorship hall, everyone was already there. Nearly 100 people were packed tightly into the room. I spotted Celine immediately. I have to admit, my taste hasn't dulled. Almost 5'7", slim waist, long legs, and black hair cascading down her shoulders. Among the plainly dressed students, she stood out like a snow lotus blooming atop a mountain peak. When she noticed my gaze, she straightened her back and lifted her chin even higher. I knew she was reborn too, the once most successful female entrepreneur, now back to being a poor student. Who knows if she's gotten used to it again? I wondered how she would react to the impending humiliation from the person she despised the most. I walked in, looking forward to it. The school staff greeted me warmly, thanking Coup Group repeatedly for giving disadvantaged students the chance to study without worry. See? Even bystanders knew how to be grateful. Yet simply because I liked her, Celine had viewed all my efforts as an insult. This time, I chose to withdraw my feelings. Hopefully, that would satisfy her. I gave a few polite remarks, saying it was part of our corporate social responsibility, and then we moved on to the main event. Based on grades, awards, and overall performance, the school recommended 10 candidates. I needed to choose one for one-on-one sponsorship. I sat at the conference table as the staff lined the students up and had them introduce themselves one by one. They were all impressive, held back only by a lack of resources. The purpose of sponsorship is to give them a boat to cross the first river blocking their path. The candidates looked at me with gratitude and anticipation. Everyone knew that one-on-one sponsorship meant more resources and a wider future. Soon it was Celine's turn. She really was outstanding, consistently in the top 10, with multiple provincial and national awards. The staff clearly favored her and invited her to say a few words to make a stronger impression. But she couldn't be bothered. She only said a brief hello. The staff frowned in displeasure. Celine didn't care at all, looking at me with a mix of pride and disdain. In my previous life, after hearing her introduction, I ignored all the remaining candidates and chose her on the spot. She must have thought it would be the same this time. Unfortunately for her, I turned to the staff and said, "No pressure. Let's hear from the next candidate." Celine froze in shock, standing there for a moment before leaving reluctantly. The staff urged her quickly, "Miss Sun, please don't delay the process." She shot me a cold glance before turning away. See? If it weren't for me choosing her back then, she wouldn't even have been qualified to stand in front of me. I didn't look at her again and continued listening to the remaining candidates. After everyone had spoken, I chose Lara. She didn't have any awards, but her grades were consistently the highest, and she was the only one with obvious bruises on her face. Apparently, her alcoholic father had beaten her. She seemed to expect nothing. Only when I announced my decision did she look up at me, her timid eyes fixed on mine, and quietly say, "Thank you." Celine sneered. "Just a bookworm." Lara pressed her lips together and stayed silent. But I wasn't going to let it slide. Are you verbally bullying your classmate? I asked coldly. Celine looked at me in surprise, then gave me a smug look that clearly said, "So you're trying to get my attention." Disgust washed over me. She maintained her calm, superior attitude. "I'm just telling the truth. So you don't think your behavior was wrong?" I asked. Ignoring her, I turned to the staff. "This is the candidate you selected? I have doubts about her character. We want to sponsor students who'll pay it forward and spread goodwill in the future. This student treats her peers with arrogance and contempt. I highly doubt she'll help others once she gains power." I deliberately escalated the issue. This time, I wouldn't waste my goodwill on an ungrateful leech. As expected, my words made the staff take it seriously. The person in charge immediately demanded that Celine apologize to Lara or risk losing her sponsorship eligibility. Celine glared at me in fury. I didn't even look back at her. Didn't she say my money humiliated her? Then let's see whether her pride would keep her from bowing for that humiliation. "I won't apologize," Celine declared stubbornly. "Don't think you can make me bow with money. I, Celine, will prove one day that a woman can succeed on her own." Her righteous declaration left everyone speechless. Refusing sponsorship somehow meant she was being bullied. What nerve! In the silence, someone started clapping. It was Simon. He applauded as he walked over and said mockingly, "With such strong conviction, Benjamin, you can't bully someone like her." He was clearly trying to paint me as someone targeting a poor student. Celine's eyes lit up when she saw him. She probably imagined some dramatic scene where a wealthy young man stood up for her against injustice. Too bad I recognized that smug, gleeful look on Simon's face. He just wanted to use her to provoke me. I wasn't about to be fooled again. She was the one who refused to apologize. I looked at Celine with contempt. She lifted her chin defiantly. "I didn't do anything wrong." I sighed as if helpless. Coup Group won't sponsor someone who can't show basic kindness. "But," I changed my tone, "since you think so highly of her, why don't Chon Group sponsor her instead?" The moment I said that, Celine's eyes sparkled as she eagerly looked at Simon. Simon hesitated, his expression awkward, before muttering, "I'll discuss it with my family." Ridiculous. He's just an ignored, illegitimate child in the Chon family. There's no way he'd get approval. But seeing Celine's smug expression, convinced Simon would catch her once I let go, I leaned back and watched. I was curious to see how far she'd go without Coup Group's support. Lara and I were both admitted to Beijing University. Celine went to the neighboring Teachers College. Her grades were good enough for Beijing University, but Teachers College offered subsidies, cheap housing, and a guaranteed monthly stipend. Lara and I ran into Celine on campus. She looked Lara up and down and sneered, "Just another girl being kept." This happened in my previous life too. Back then, I liked her and always found excuses to stay close. Rumors spread that she had latched onto the Coup family heir and was set for life. Once, when I went to the cafeteria with her, someone said right to her face, "Just another girl being kept." Her face darkened instantly. That person strutted away, and in her fury, Celine flipped my lunch tray, yelling at me to stay away from her. Greasy food spilled all over me as everyone stared. I still remember the humiliation, wishing the ground would swallow me. I regret not slapping her back then. Who did she think she was? When she was accused, she lashed out. Now, as the accuser, she sneered mercilessly at someone standing where she once stood. I was about to respond when Lara stepped forward and met her gaze. "You're jealous of me," Lara said calmly, her usually gentle face firm and resolute. Celine stepped back slightly, forcing a scoff. "Why would I be jealous of you?" Lara moved forward again. "You're jealous I got into Beijing University and you didn't. You're jealous Coup chose me instead of you. You're jealous I'm the one standing beside Coup now, not you." Her words hit one after another. I almost applauded. Celine was completely outmatched. After all, she couldn't very well claim she preferred Teachers College to Beijing University. In the end, she could only mutter, "I don't have time for this," and hurried away. Only then did Lara relax and return quietly to my side. "You're not angry?" I asked. "I know it's not true," she replied. "Good. At least this time, I chose someone clear-headed, not someone who turned on me at the first rumor. I thought Celine's pride would keep her away from me for a long time. I underestimated her shameless persistence. While I was studying in the library, she found me. Benjamin, I'm giving you the chance to invest in my new energy company. Invest 50 million, and I'll give you 0.1% of the original shares. She leaned over my desk, looking down at me with a mix of contempt, indifference, coldness, and faint pity. She looked exactly like some domineering CEO, but who tries to attract investors with that attitude? I kicked the table leg and stood up. You're too close. She staggered, barely regaining her balance. Good. At least her presence wasn't suffocating anymore. Around us, students glared at us for the disturbance. I apologized sincerely. Sorry, a student from another school was bothering me. Who are you calling a bother? Celine raised her voice. Instantly, gossip-loving students turned to watch. She faltered. Benjamin, don't push it, she said through clenched teeth. I shrugged, unimpressed. Angry but forced to endure it, she continued. Think it over. When your family goes bankrupt, don't say I didn't give you a chance. She looked at me like I was her puppet. Suddenly, I understood. In my previous life, to support her company, I had secretly diverted every available fund into her venture. That caused Coup Group's cash flow to collapse, nearly bankrupting us. Later, her technological breakthrough attracted new investors, saving the company. No wonder she always acted superior. She'd been seeing herself as my family's savior all along. But if it weren't for the money I gave her, Coup Group would never have faced that crisis. Someone like her only remembers outcomes that benefit her, never the process. Seeing that clearly, I dropped all politeness. So you want an investment? Do you even have a business license? A team? A business plan? Projected returns? I fired off questions she couldn't answer. I looked at her with disdain. You want me to invest when you have nothing? Why should I? For your looks. I meant it as an insult, but she seemed to misunderstand, her face flashing with anger and shame. Don't think money lets you do whatever you want. I'll never bow to you. Fine. No investment. I'll wait for the day you regret it. She stormed out of the library, flustered, leaving behind a strange sense of satisfaction. But honestly, I just didn't want to waste money on her. In the end, Celine did get funding. Simon found her an investor who put in 5 million for 51% of the company. She instantly became famous on campus. She was enrolled in the top teacher training program, but her classes were irrelevant to her startup. She skipped them entirely. When teachers criticized her, she snapped back, asking how many years of their salary equaled 5 million. After that, no one bothered her. I knew her project well. She's smart. In my last life, she entered the new energy vehicle field, focusing on battery endurance. I admired her back then, thinking she was the smartest girl alive. I used my connections to get her into the best program at Beijing University. She studied hard for 4 years, then founded her company with her advisor. But now, she's just a freshman. Even with memories from her past life, she's been in management too long, far removed from hands-on technical work. Can she really succeed on her own with just that knowledge? I'll be watching. She assembled a startup team, trying to recruit people she'd worked with before. But only a few, those in similar straits, were persuaded to join her. As for her former mentor, I heard he rejected her outright, without even meeting her. No surprise. He's a top expert in the field. Why would he waste time on a poor student from a teacher training college? For me, things were different. Using my status as an alumnus and a 30 million yuan initial investment, I happily partnered with Professor Zhang. I even arranged for Lara to join his team. After all, she was already studying in this field. Getting her into Professor Zhang's group early meant she could seamlessly move into a combined bachelor's, master's, and doctoral track. It was a perfect setup. Not long after joining, Lara started sharing some entertaining gossip she'd heard from her teammates about Celine. For example, Celine once declared, "I want all our competitors' data within 3 minutes." Her senior immediately opened a professional data platform, typed furiously, and quickly navigated to a page, only to be stopped by a membership paywall. He turned the screen toward Celine. The arrogance she usually carried sky-high instantly collapsed when she saw the membership fee, 300,000 yuan. In my previous life, with Ku Group footing the bill, Celine had always enjoyed unrestricted access to this kind of data. But this time, she was finally experiencing just how expensive updated information really was. Naturally, she didn't purchase the membership. An hour later, she casually handed over a list of a few companies and told them to research their new products. The results were laughable. There was barely any useful information, and one of the companies didn't even exist. When her senior reported this, Celine spent a full 30 minutes berating him, insisting, "These are industry leaders. How could there be so little data?" Making demands without paying the price was asking too much. Unable to endure it any longer, her senior had a massive argument with her and quit on the spot. Later, he complained to Lara and the others, saying Celine was a princess without a princess's life, yet burdened with all the princess's ailments. I thought that description fit her perfectly. Celine had always been proud to a fault. In my past life, her smooth rise had only been possible because I propped her up with Ku Group's resources. When she needed data, Ku's strategy department had premium subscriptions to every major professional database. When she needed proposals, a dozen managers, each a specialist, worked tirelessly to prepare materials for her presentations. When she wanted technological breakthroughs, dozens of experts in the lab worked day and night to produce patent-level results, all credited under her name. Bit by bit, these people built her halo, turning her into a so-called technical genius and rising business star. Yet she always believed it was her own brilliance illuminating everyone else. Back then, I was foolish enough to think she was an unpolished gem. Celine's startup team didn't last long. As soon as they achieved some progress, one member left with the core technology. Celine called it theft, but in truth, the man was simply filing the patent under his own name after she insisted all credit belonged to her. He took the technology to a company owned by a wealthy heir and immediately earned 10 times his previous salary. Furious, Celine stormed into his office and made a scene. When the heir pushed her away, she retaliated by smashing him with a vase. Both ended up hospitalized. When I heard the news, I immediately informed Simon and rushed over. In my previous life, that wealthy heir had no intention of letting Celine off easily. I had paid an enormous price to protect her back then. This time, I was content to stand aside and watch Simon put on a performance. In the hospital room, Celine lay alone on the bed, her injured leg propped high in a cast. Opposite her, the heir sat in a wheelchair, his head wrapped in thick layers of bandages, with several large bodyguards standing behind him. Celine looked terrified. It was almost ironic. In my last life, when I'd stood alone at her hospital door blocking them, I had been terrified myself. But this time was different. This time, I was here purely to enjoy the spectacle. When Celine saw Simon and me, her expression visibly relaxed. When her eyes landed on me, she even wore a faintly arrogant smile, as if thinking, I knew he couldn't let me go. She even seemed irritated that I'd arrived so late. I had to restrain myself from walking over and wiping that smug look off her face. The heir noticed her gaze and asked, "Are you her boyfriend?" I immediately waved my hands and stepped back. "I'm just passing by." Celine shot me a furious glare. Then she turned toward Simon, her eyes softening, as though imagining I was jealous. I took another step back, unwilling to get splashed by stupidity. The heir shifted his attention to Simon. Simon stepped forward. Celine looked at him with glowing, hopeful eyes. "Don't misunderstand," Simon said smoothly. "We're just classmates. I think there's been some misunderstanding between you two. Once it's cleared up, everything should be fine." As he spoke, he brushed his bangs back in an exaggerated, affected gesture. "Misunderstanding?" the heir sneered. "There's no misunderstanding." She cracked my skull. "I'm here for compensation." He cast Simon a disdainful glance. Simon looked around nervously. "Oh," the heir said coldly. "So you're paying for her?" Simon hesitated, still trying to play mediator. "Not exactly. I was hoping you could be a little lenient." The heir stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Fine. I was supposed to close a 1 billion yuan deal today. She ruined it by smashing my head. She should cover the loss. But since you're asking, I'll give her a 10% discount. Just 900 million. Generous, right? The demand was outrageous. Simon's face drained of all color. I barely know her. You should deal with her directly. He didn't spare Celine a single glance before hurriedly leaving the room. The light in Celine's eyes visibly dimmed. With no one left to defend her, the heir fixed her with a cold stare. If I'm not satisfied with the compensation, I'll send you to jail. It was exactly the same as in my previous life. Even though both were injured, Celine had started it. If the heir refused to settle, she would certainly face criminal charges. She knew it too. Back then, I had secretly traded Coup Group's most profitable division to save her, not only to keep her safe but also to retrieve the stolen core technology. This time, she had neither money nor influence, yet still charged into his company. She probably believed I would rescue her again. Sure enough, Celine turned to me. Benjamin, if you help me with this, I'll be your girlfriend. After saying it, she shut her eyes and turned her head away, as though enduring unbearable humiliation. How laughable. In my last life, I'd worried about her injuries and didn't want to pressure her, so I never told her what I had paid for her sake. This time, I wanted her to see clearly what she had lost. I pretended to hesitate, looking eagerly at the heir and speaking in an exaggerated tone. Tell me, what would it take for you to let her go? One of the heir's men recognized me, and instead of lowering the demand, they raised it. Well. So it's the Coup family's heir. My apologies for not recognizing you earlier, the heir said with a smile. We're practically family, no need to talk about money. That's tacky. If you want me to let your little girlfriend off the hook, it's simple. Trade me Coup Group's retail channels. He looked at me expectantly. Celine's eyes flew open. She turned sharply toward me. In my last life, she'd once taken over Coup Group, so she knew exactly what those retail channels meant. I pretended to hesitate. Celine's expression softened instantly. She was clearly recalling how Coup Group's retail network had once been freely open for her use, just for her. As she gazed at me with gratitude, I smiled coldly. If she really were my girlfriend, I'd pay without hesitation. But some people don't know their place and have let themselves be sullied. I'm not into garbage collection. I rolled my eyes dramatically and strode out of the room, satisfaction surging through me. Celine didn't end up in jail. The heir never actually wanted money, he wanted her project. She was forced to hand over her entire startup team and even signed a contract to work under him. Apparently, she wouldn't even become a regular employee until after graduation and would only receive a monthly stipend of 1,000 yuan. When Simon found out, he was furious. The 5 million yuan investment he'd made for her had come from a wealthy older woman he'd been involved with. Now not only had he earned nothing, but he'd also lost all the money. The woman suspected he and Celine had colluded to scam her and dumped him in a rage. Simon, naturally furious, confronted Celine. They argued back and forth before she finally signed a 5 million yuan IOU. At a salary of 1,000 yuan a month, she wouldn't finish paying it back in her lifetime. I laughed at Simon's stupidity. But soon, my laughter faded. That shameless Celine turned her attention back to me. One early morning, as I was heading to class, I found her waiting at the entrance. She was holding a small transparent plastic bag containing 2 large steamed buns from the cafeteria. Benjamin. She jogged over when she saw me. Here, your favorite steamed buns. She offered them to me with a forced smile, probably thinking she looked endearing. In reality, it was painful to watch. The sight made me so nauseous I nearly threw up. Celine wasn't stupid and immediately noticed my reaction. She frowned, clearly irritated. Don't like them. Didn't you used to? She trailed off. I smirked as I watched her nervously stop herself. Used to? Of course. In my past life, it had been right after she threw my tray at me in the cafeteria. I was so humiliated that I avoided her for a week. Word spread that she had a rough time during that week, and eventually she couldn't stand it. The next day, she brought me breakfast, 2 cold steamed buns. Looking back now, I even wonder if they were leftovers from her own meal. But back then, I was blindly in love. All I could think was that Celine had bought me breakfast. That Celine herself had brought me breakfast. I swallowed those dry buns, nearly choking, yet continued following her around, thrilled. I'd love nothing more than to go back in time and slap myself. I don't even like buns. He doesn't like buns. I turned to see Lara standing behind me. She held a pink thermos in both hands, with a bottle of fresh milk balanced on top. I told you, you don't need to make breakfast for me every day, I said, a little embarrassed. Skipping breakfast is bad for the stomach. Lara handed me the milk. One time, she'd caught me dealing with a stomachache, and I'd casually mentioned skipping breakfast. From that day on, she made me breakfast every single morning, rain or shine, never missing a day. I took the milk. It was the perfect temperature and tasted wonderful. Seeing herself ignored, Celine snorted and turned away. As she passed the trash can, she tossed the buns inside with a loud thud, never once looking back. So rude, I muttered. Wasting food is a shame, Lara said. She picked up the buns, removed the plastic, and placed them where people often left food for the stray cats. At that moment, I thought she looked incredibly beautiful. Celine didn't give up. She always found ways to appear around me, like an annoying fly that wouldn't go away. In class, she'd reserve a seat in advance and wave at me from afar. I went straight to the professor and complained that someone was distracting me from studying. In the cafeteria, she'd stand in a long line and call for me to cut in front of her. I turned around and went to the stir-fry section on the third floor instead. On weekends, she'd wait downstairs asking to walk with me. I simply took long strides and got into the luxury car sent to pick me up. She was endlessly bothersome. When Lara heard about it, she started spending more time with me. Her coursework was already heavy, and she was part of the professor's research group, leaving her very little rest. Yet when she was with me, she was always calm and unhurried. At night, after she finished studying, I'd walk her back to her dorm, and we'd feed the stray cats together. The kittens were cautious yet eager. Lara would break the fish into small pieces in her palm, and the cats would follow the scent to her hand. I tried the same. Their soft, wet tongues brushing my palm sent a tingling sensation straight to my heart. I feel a little jealous of a cat, Lara murmured softly. I turned to her and saw her eyes shining. I realized how close we were, shoulders nearly touching. Through the thin fabric of her sleeve, I could almost feel her warmth. A gentle breeze carried a sweet scent, not flowers, but Lara herself. I leaned in slightly, captivated. "What are you two doing?" A sharp voice shattered the moment. Celine stood behind us, her face twisted with anger. The startled cats scattered. Her gaze was fixed on me, barely containing her fury. Lara stood and moved to my side. I dropped the fish, stood up, brushed off my hands, and placed Lara behind me. "And who are you to question me?" I asked calmly, meeting Celine's eyes. I'm. Her voice was hoarse, as though something lodged in her throat. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion, then regret, and finally pain. "You're mine," she said, staring at me as if I were the most handsome man alive. I didn't believe a single word. Even if it were true, it disgusted me. I turned to Lara. "You should head up." She nodded. "I'll watch until you get inside." "All right." I turned and walked away. Celine kept calling after me. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Celine is like a muddy pit. The last time I stepped in, I was dragged down and dirted myself, and my family along with me. This time, all I have to do is stay far away. Celine finally stopped clinging to me, but Lara's presence in my life didn't change at all. We still had breakfast together every morning, and our evening walks to feed the stray cats became part of our routine. Then one day, Lara didn't show up, from morning until night. An uneasiness crept into my chest. I asked one of her senior classmates, but he hadn't seen her in the lab, and she wasn't replying to any messages. I immediately used my family's connections to investigate. What I found made my heart sink. Lara had left campus late at night and then vanished. Digging further, I learned that the last place she was seen was a filthy, cluttered alley. That area was where her family lived. I thought of her alcoholic father and the bruises I'd noticed the first time I met her. I didn't hesitate. I gathered a team and rushed over. Her small, run-down house was stained black with grime. A drunken man leaned against the wall, reeking of alcohol, a bottle clutched in his hand. When we arrived, He squinted against the sunlight and took another swig. "Where's Lara?" I demanded. He ignored me. One of my men grabbed him and shook him a few times before he finally slurred, "She was taken away. That little brat thought staying away meant she could dodge me, but someone came looking for her to collect my debts." He swayed with the bottle still in his hand. A flicker of suspicion crossed my mind, but I couldn't grasp it fully. After a few sharp slaps, he finally cowered and muttered the debt collector's name, Code Dragon. I immediately led my men to Dragon's territory. Seeing that I'd brought a large group, Dragon agreed to let me enter alone to negotiate. I didn't hesitate. Lara was locked inside an empty room with only a table and a chair. She sat on the chair, a clear bruise on her face, 2 burly men standing on either side of her, and a debt note placed in front of her. Despite the red mark on her cheek, she clenched her teeth, silently holding back her tears. "Pretty tough girl," Dragon remarked, waving his hand for his men to step back. The moment Lara saw me, tears streamed down her face. "What are you doing here?" she asked, struggling to stand, only to be shoved back down. "No need to rush," Dragon said lazily. "Your boyfriend looks capable. Maybe he'll pay your father's debt, and you two can leave peacefully." "Sounds nice, doesn't it?" He walked over and spread the debt note in front of me. "Handsome guy like you, a few 100,000 yuan should be nothing. Pay it for her, and I'll personally escort you both out." I glanced at the amount, over 1 million yuan. "I'll pay," I said without hesitation. Lara's eyes darkened, and she suddenly began struggling violently. "I'll sign it myself. I'll sign. Don't make him pay." Her voice trembled with sobs. It hurt to see. All I wanted was to pay immediately and get her out of there. But one of Dragon's men leaned in and whispered something to him. Dragon's expression shifted instantly. "So you're the Ku family's young master?" He smiled thinly. "My apologies. A few 100,000 would be insulting." He snapped his fingers, and a new debt note was placed in front of me. This one was for 100 million yuan, with a daily interest rate of 1%. "Just sign here, young Master Ku," Dragon said, tapping the signature line. "And we're good." Even for him, that was pure greed. I pressed my lips together and stayed silent. Dragon's men slowly closed in. My bodyguards tensed, ready to move. Just as the situation was about to explode, the door burst open. The police. I'd called them before entering, and they didn't disappoint. Panic spread across Dragon's men's faces. One of them grabbed a chair and hurled it at me. I didn't even have time to dodge. But the impact never came. Lara had thrown herself in front of me. Dragon was arrested. Lara was rushed to the hospital. During the investigation, it was discovered that Celine had called Lara out late at night. Unfortunately, she claimed she was only passing along a message from Lara's father. There wasn't enough evidence to charge her. After giving a statement, Celine was released. But Lara and I both knew she wasn't innocent. While Lara was hospitalized, Celine shamelessly came to visit. Lara had injured her shoulder and was half reclining on the bed. I was feeding her spoonfuls of bird's nest soup. She'd been shy at first, but the moment Celine walked in, she deliberately accepted another spoonful from me, slowly, with a look that clearly said she wanted more. I couldn't help smiling. Celine stared at us, her expression dark and twisted. "Benjamin, what's so special about her?" she snapped. "A gambler's daughter, and you think she's worth all this? Or do you just enjoy playing with poor kids from broken families?" She was nearly hysterical. Her words barely concealed the fact that she remembered our past lives. But instead of anger, I felt amused. Playing with her. In my last life, I nearly destroyed Ku Group for her. She called that playing. I didn't even bother arguing. "Celine, you're not welcome here. Leave," I said firmly. Instead of leaving, she moved closer, squatted beside me, and reached for my hand. I pulled away. Frustration flickered across her face, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Benjamin, stop fooling around. Let's go back to how things were. Stay by my side, and I'll treat you well from now on. Isn't that what you want?" There was even a trace of pleading in her eyes. I smiled deliberately. Just as hope began to bloom in her gaze, Lara spoke. I don't want to. Just like in my last life, when I'd begged her to spare Ku Group and my parents, she'd clung to Simon's arm, stepped on my hand, and said the exact same words. Lara recovered quickly. The day the doctor allowed her discharge, she returned straight to the lab. My parents were shaken by the incident with Dragon. When they learned that Lara had saved me, they often asked me to bring her home. I found myself traveling between school and home frequently. Life became calm again. Until one day, I noticed the worry etched on my father's face. When I asked, he told me the family business was under attack. Long-time clients were being poached. In every bid, competitors somehow knew our bottom line. Even our previously secure retail channels were being encroached upon. The person behind it all was the same wealthy heir who'd fought with Celine. He was nibbling away, nothing fatal, but enough to be infuriating. My father didn't want to bother with such petty tactics and handed the matter to me. I knew Celine was behind it, using memories from our past life. But proving it was nearly impossible. That left me with only one choice, to push forward with a new energy project. After her team was absorbed by the wealthy heirs company, Celine struggled badly. She hit wall after wall and eventually tried to contact Professor Zhang, who was collaborating with me. She didn't know that Professor Zhang often told me amusing stories about her attempts. When that failed, she turned her attention to Lara's senior classmates. Lara mentioned that one of them seemed tempted but hadn't acted yet. I originally planned to have Professor Zhang transfer him out, but instead, I told Lara to quietly observe him. The new energy project progressed rapidly. Under Professor Zhang's leadership, the team applied for the patent as a joint research result. As soon as the patent was approved, Celine filed a lawsuit against both Professor Zhang and Ku Group, accusing us of stealing her technology. Her witness was the senior student she'd bribed. She also took the matter online, stirring public opinion to smear Ku Group. "Benjamin, come back to me, and I'll withdraw the lawsuit," she said confidently before the trial. It was laughable. In my last life, I gave her everything, and she threw me away. Now I kept crushing her, and she chased after me. "You're dreaming," I said coldly, brushing past her. In court, Celine was smug. She presented various data comparisons, insisting her team had developed the technology first. We presented only 2 pieces of evidence. First, surveillance footage showing her senior secretly copying lab data and handing it over to her. Second, the real data comparison. The data he'd stolen was fake. Meanwhile, Celine was accusing us using 2 entirely different sets of data. The verdict was obvious. Our lawyer immediately filed a countersuit. Data theft constituted unfair competition. Her false plagiarism accusation was slander. Spreading misinformation online damaged our reputation. Multiple charges were filed and accepted on the spot. The final judgment would take time, but Celine couldn't escape this time. Before the verdict, she requested one last meeting. I agreed. Lara came with me but stayed a short distance away. Watching Lara walk off, Celine sneered. "So you really fell for a poor girl." I knew she'd realized I was reborn too. Betraying someone who loves you and repaying kindness with resentment, that's character, not poverty. "So you came back too." Her eyes burned. "We're the same. We belong together." I couldn't understand how she could still believe that. "Celine." It was rare for me to say her name. Her eyes lit up with hope. "Do you remember the 5 million yuan debt you owe?" Her expression froze. I didn't bother being polite anymore. "Seeing you like this makes me happy. In my last life, I loved you so much that you felt superior to me. My love became the ladder you climbed to reach heights you never deserved. But instead of gratitude, you despised that ladder, calling it dirty. If you hated it so much, you should have said so. Instead, you enjoyed everything I gave while wanting nothing more than to crush me into the ground. This time, I owe you nothing. I only took back what was mine. And look," I laughed softly. "This is exactly where you were always meant to be." Celine's face went pale. She collapsed inward, defeated, no longer able to maintain the pride I'd once fueled with endless affection and resources. I ignored her and walked over to Lara. Her gaze never left me. "I'm just a poor girl," she murmured, lowering her lashes. I was about to comfort her when she suddenly looked up, smiling brightly. "But I won't always be." She held up her phone, showing me a message. "Your new patent application has been approved." "I'll create more patents," she said, beaming. "I'll build my own ladder and climb to you step by step." I pulled her into my arms and kissed her deeply.